On this episode of the AAF Exchange, tariff turmoil, reconciliation progresses, and a regulatory update. Joining us to discuss all of this are AAF President Douglas Holtz-Eakin and Director of Regulatory Policy Dan Goldbeck. Doug, thanks for joining us.
Always a pleasure.
So how have you been? It's been a while.
I've been great.
You've been traveling all over the place recently.
I have been traveling a lot. Too much, actually. Yeah. But I don't say no very well. I think that's the basic problem.
Yeah. You made a half joke last week that pretty much Megan's the only one that knows your schedule at this point. And
she is. And one thing I have learned is if you're going to have a scheduler, have one who likes you.
Yeah. Fair enough. All right. So what's been on your mind?
Well, as usual, reconciliation and tax and all those things, and my growing irritation with the existence of the G20 initiative known as Pillar 1 and Pillar 2. Mm-hmm. Pillar 1 is where we give away our tax base to other countries. Pillar 2 was supposed to be an alternative minimum tax. Remember, we had one. After the 17 Act, we had the initiative called GILTI, and that was supposed to be a minimum tax on intangible, lightly taxed income, and that made a lot of sense. And we signed on to this OECD process, and it's just a nightmare. So now what's happening is this minimum tax that every country is supposed to adopt and put on themselves has become a way for them to tax our companies. And the response by the Ways and Means Committee, there are a couple of bills in the House, has been to say, okay, if you're in one of these countries that's taxing our guys, we're going to put an extra tax on you. If you're just getting into a tax war, this is the tariff war all over again. The right way to solve this is a diplomatic issue, and these taxes need to go away. They just make no sense.
Yeah.
It doesn't work to have a cartel fixing prices in anything, and international tax prices are the same as everything else. So I'm opposed to the cartel.
Yeah. So this is an issue that's gone back since the Biden. This started under the Biden administration. I mean, that's when we started hearing about Pillar 1 and Pillar 2 a lot more, because I believe Secretary Yellen was overseas trying to negotiate this.
The roots of this go way back.
Yeah.
This is Obama era stuff.
Oh, okay. So it goes back even further.
Yeah, there was this initiative called base erosion and profit shifting. We've been chasing this phantom for a while, and I think all of the solutions are much more costly than the problems. So it's time to stop.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. All right. Well, let's turn. You mentioned tariffs already, so let's talk about those.
I mean, see, it's a day ending in DAY, so we might have to talk about tariffs.
I mean, it seems like these days that's all we talk about. And
yes.
Every other dish, I think, mentions it, if not every dish.
It's really amazing.
So, I mean, it does really feel like things are shifting every day. So where do we stand right now?
Well, I think the amazing thing is that we have in place, not on pause, no negotiation, a 10% universal tariff, tariffs on aluminum, steel, and autos, promises of additional tariffs on pharmaceuticals, silicon chips, copper, lumber, these sectoral tariffs, all in the interests of national security. I'm trying to figure out where generic drugs fit in this national security picture, but I digress. And then what's up for negotiation are these reciprocal tariffs, which the president announced on Liberation Day, and we saw the world equity markets tank and the outcry. So that's we had Japan in yesterday. Italy's coming in. We'll see how that plays out. And we have 145% tariffs on China. We've raised those as high as we can imagine, I guess. Those will cut off trade with China. That's all it's intended to do. So, and they're waiting for Xi to make an offer, but I have no idea what the administration wants of China.
Yeah,
I bet China doesn't know either. Mm-hmm. It's a theme that runs through this is we have upfront costs for supposed benefits. We can't figure out what we're going to get, and they don't articulate what we're going to get. So I don't know what we're going to get from Mexico. What are we going to get from Canada? What are they asking of China? So we're good at imposing costs on ourselves.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if it was a threat or if it was a series like a actual outright ban, but they basically said we're going to stop shipping parcels to the United States at this point.
Absolutely, they have built in Hong Kong on the mainland. They've stopped shipments to the U.S. So you can have tariffs or you can have quotas. And our quota is currently 0.
Yeah,
you're not going to get any rare earths, nothing like that. And of course, the impact of tariffs is unambiguously to make costs higher and thus prices higher, and or to slow the growth of the economy. And the Fed chairman had the nerve to stand up here today and say that out loud, which that's the reality. Sorry.
Yeah.
And the president doesn't like to hear that and is now urging his termination as quickly as possible.
What has the economic fallout been in general with these?
I think it's saying not yet. I mean, when you look at any of the survey data, the sort of soft data, inflation expectations are way up. So the University of Michigan number was 6.7% over the next year, highest since 1981. New York Fed that came out on Monday had it go from 3 to 3.5 over the next year. That's the one I follow most closely and believe the most. Consumer sentiment's way down, CEO sentiment's way down, small business optimism's way down. But in the hard data, it hasn't really shown up yet. Like we got new claims for unemployment insurance this morning. Claims went down. So there's no mass layoffs yet. And I predict this one. We're going to get the first quarter GDP number on April 30th. And in the absence of the tariff initiative, that'd probably be a negative number. But we're going to see a big rise in inventories and a big rise in consumer spending as people bought to beat the tariffs, and it's going to mask the underlying weakness in the economy. Yeah. But at some point, the data are going to catch up with us.
I mean, anecdotally speaking, that's where I'm at as a consumer. I'm looking at, okay, what do I need to buy now?
You are my leading indicator of the U.S. economy, Kyle. You know that.
Do I need to stock up on golf balls for the year? Do I need to?
Well, that's a different issue. That's your driving.
Yeah. And then, there's even, I saw a couple of reports like, okay, what electronics are in, what electronics are out. Like, is there going to be this, exemption for iPhone users and things like that? So, I mean,
let's get serious. 97% of strollers sold in the United States come from China. Yeah. That's a crisis.
Yeah. Wow, I didn't even know that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, it's just I know a lot of businesses that are stocking up ahead of time. Things like that.
Yes.
You hear those stories all the time, and it'll be interesting to see, the reaction to, like you said,
But pulling all that activity into the first quarter means that the second quarter number is going to be dismal.
Yeah.
It was just sort of puts off the realization of what's going on.
Right. So, I mean, the strategy, the goal of all this, it's been hard to actually pin down
we don't know
what the administration's goal, what the end game of these tariffs are. So let me ask this tough question for you. Where do we go from here?
I am quite concerned about it. I think the amazing thing is that when he announced a 10% tariff on the campaign trail, it was nearly universally panned, especially by the economics profession. That's in place, and people seem to have forgotten about that. They're so focused on the even worse reciprocal tariffs. That's bad news. I mean, what we have on the table right now is Smoot-Hawley level tariffs. And so this is the biggest tax increase in 40 years, the biggest tariff in almost 100. And so where do we go from here? I don't know. We're in a trade war. We had a big trade war associated with the Great Depression, and it took most of the 20th century to unwind it.
Wow.
Most of what we think of as the GATT rounds and the WTO rounds were really just unwinding the protectionism that came in the Great Depression. So this is not a good moment. There's no way to disguise it as a good moment. And it needs to be unwound as quickly as possible, but that's a hard process.
Yeah, wow, yeah, that's certainly not a history you want to be part of. No. As we always talk, history repeats itself.
Yes.
All right. Speaking of repeating itself, let's turn to Congress.
Must we?
So, reconciliation obviously is making its way. The House voted last week to align itself with the Senate's budget resolution.
Be careful what you say.
Yeah.
They both passed the piece of paper, but they aren't in alignment.
Okay. Yes. Right. Well.
Right.
So give us a quick recap.
I've never seen anything like this. So normal process: House passes a budget resolution, Senate passes one. They don't match. They sit down and they hammer out which numbers they are both going to work with. What are the tax cuts going to be? What are the spending reductions going to be? What are the deficits that will be created or fixed in reconciliation? These guys sat down and said, I like my numbers, I don't like your numbers. Both agreed that that was true. So they put both sets of numbers in a resolution, and both the House and the Senate passed it. And in that sense, it is joint. They have both passed the same piece of paper, but they have not come to any agreement. So off we go. It's a great country.
Yeah, I mean, because there was that whole episode where Senate Majority Leader Thune came out and was like, "Listen, we're gonna work with you as much as possible." So, I mean, to try and get to where we need to be, obviously the Senate has its own set of rules that it needs to follow in this. So, as the process moves forward, we're still waiting to try to get to that final one big beautiful bill.
Yeah.
What should we expect next?
Well, they will both craft actual piece of legislation. So budget resolutions are just that, resolutions. They're not bills. They're going to pass tax or craft tax and spending bills, and they may pass them individually, and they aren't going to match. And at that point, they're going to have a genuine conference to genuinely come to one piece of legislation that they can both pass and send to the president for signature. Now, the way they've set it up, and what Leader Thune said was, if you can do the aggressive spending cuts, and we're going to try that the House wants, that's more than the Senate's asking for. So you can still pass that in resolution. You're not creating deficits, and that the Senate has a little bit more in the way of tax cuts. So if you only do the House level, you can also do that. So what he pledged was, we, the Senate, will be very reasonable when it comes to the ultimate conference. But of course they pledged that.
Yeah.
And I don't need to question their integrity, but no decisions have been made. They continue to just kick this thing down the road, and at some point they're going to have to decide what they're going to do.
Yeah.
And I'm waiting for that moment.
Interesting. So, I mean, the biggest hang-up seems to be around what Energy and Commerce has to do with the healthcare fundings, or
the spending cuts in general.
Spending
cuts in general. I mean, the House has $1.5 to $2 trillion in spending reductions. The Senate has $3 billion.
Yeah. Wow.
They're a little bit apart.
That's a little bit of apart. I mean, just looking at the budget, I mean, if you're going to have $1.5 trillion in cuts, some of that's got to come from non-discretionary funding.
Yeah, you got to touch the mandatories to make that kind of a cut.
But to your point, they're kicking these decisions down the road, and
absolutely
nobody's making decisions on those.
Yes. Yeah. So I mean, they have a 2-week recess to probably back taking the temperature of their constituents in town halls and things to sort of see where they can get, and but the real action starts when they come back, and their intent is to do this by the August recess. I have been skeptical of that from the beginning, but we shall see. And I remember lurking in the background is the debt limit, with the X date somewhere in August, maybe September. Both resolutions contain an increase in the debt limit. Of course, they didn't agree on the amount. 4 in the House, 5 in the Senate. Will that drive the process so that they have to get it done by the X date? Or will they have to pull the debt limit out and do it as a standalone? That's a development that we have to keep an eye on.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, that's all I had on that today. And I don't have a trivia question for you today. So I guess let me.
I have a trivia question for you.
Sure.
Where was my most recent trip?
Where in the world was Doug? You were in Purdue, right?
Yeah, I went out to Indiana.
Yeah,
2 days out there.
This was part of your every semester you go out there and give some lectures and.
Yeah. I spent 2 days at Purdue in the fall, 2 days this spring. I will just say honestly, I don't think I'm a big fan of Indiana, which really does look like the world's longest John Mellencamp video. But I enjoyed Purdue and I enjoyed the students.
Yeah,
especially.
Yeah. Did you get what in your? I know you've been traveling a lot, but did you get to watch the Masters at all last week?
Yeah, but Beth is a big Masters fan, my wife, and so we definitely watched the Masters. I'm not the world's biggest McIlroy fan, so this was a painful thing to watch.
Yeah.
It was painful to watch in general.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. However,
I am a big fan of Justin Rose, so that was fun.
I was, it's as much as I wasn't a fan of McIlroy, it was kind of a good moment for golf just to see him finally get there.
I agree with that, and you do have to acknowledge that he's one of only 6 human beings ever to win
That's incredible.
the lifetime race.
It's incredible.
So
think of all the
that's
ones that
huge.
haven't done it. Phil Mickelson, obviously, fellow lefty of mine. But yeah, it's quite amazing that only 6 individuals in the history of golf have gotten what
it is
he
remarkable.
accomplished. So, anyways, Doug, thanks for joining us.
Yep.
See you next time.
Thanks.
Dan, welcome back.
Hey, thanks for having me.
It's been a busy couple of months for you with everything going on. We'll start with the one area, that we thought was going to get a lot more attention is the Congressional Review Act. And now the window's closing on that. You wrote a great piece a couple of days ago on that.
Yeah.
Briefly remind us what is the Congressional Review Act and why is the window closing?
Sure. So the Congressional Review Act is this law from the 90s that allows Congress in a limited window to vote down administrative rulemakings. Particularly in the Senate, they get to avoid the filibuster for the 60 legislative day window. And so in this case, as I wrote about, it looks like that window is closing in about mid to early May. So Congress is on this break right now. When they come back, they'll have about 2 weeks to take use of this expedited process to repeal certain Biden-era rulemakings.
Mm-hmm. So now where does Congress actually stand on all this?
So far in this year or so, they've passed 7 of these CRA resolutions so far. President Trump has signed 3 of them into law. I think it's just a matter of time before he signs the other 4 into law. And I took this look at it the other week here, and comparing it to 2017 when you also had this Republican trifecta of President Trump and Republican majorities in both chambers of Congress, they passed 14 of these resolutions in the opening months of that first Trump term. So they're only about halfway to the point that they were about 8 years ago. So they have some catching up to do within the next couple weeks here if they really want to match that goal, which is really kind of surprising. My expectation coming into this term was that they would really hit the ground running and either match or exceed that total from 2017, and they may not even get to that point yet.
Interesting. Speaking of deregulations, in previous episodes we talked about Trump's 10-to-1 proposal, but it's been pretty quiet on that front. What's the latest on the administration's regulatory agenda?
So we had the announcement of 10-to-1, this new regulatory budget. Haven't seen many details on that lately, but just this last week, we got a whole bunch of executive orders touching a lot of aspects of regulatory policy. You had a couple of broad-based ones looking at sunsetting certain energy and environmental rules. There was one directing agencies to look at rules that have anti-competitive regulatory barriers, which is interesting in light of the whole tariff thing too. But that's a different story, different expert to call in for that. But then you also had a couple that I think are pretty significant in terms of their potential impact on the regulatory process. In particular, you had this one directing the Department of Energy to repeal the definition of showerhead that was enacted under President Biden. This seems to be a particular priority of President Trump going back to his last term as well and throughout his campaigns and such. So it seems like a very sort of mundane issue, but the key aspect of this executive order was that basically he said, you don't have to go through the usual notice and comment because I say so. And then DOE obliged and produced this rulemaking that said, we're repealing this definition of showerhead without notice and comment because the president said so. And so that's going to set up an interesting dynamic there because it's not clear that this falls into the good cause exception under the Administrative Procedure Act. And so there's certainly going to be litigation on it, I imagine. And we'll just see how that shakes out. But that goes into another actually executive memo that comes out of an executive order. It's all very fun and complicated like that. But it directs agencies, kind of government-wide to take a look at their whole stock of rulemakings, and then it gives them this list of 10 recent Supreme Court decisions, including things like Loper Bright, things like the decision dealing with major questions doctrine, and directs agencies to look at their rules and then find if they contravene any of these decisions. And then, once they identify those rules, make a determination if they are the kind of rules that they can repeal without going through notice and comment using this good cause exception. And once again, it's not clear exactly what the bounds of it are. There's going to certainly be legal challenges here, and depending upon how it shakes out, it could really significantly change how agencies go about either repealing or making rules going forward. So it's really something to watch, I think.
Yeah, did you think you were going to have to become a legal expert?
No, I thought I avoided the law school bill coming to work here, so we'll see. But maybe it's worth considering.
All right, so finally this week was, of course, the dreaded tax day, the holiday that nobody really wanted. That was Tuesday.
Sure.
You released your annual analysis on the cost of paperwork. Give us the highlights of that paper.
So this is something we look at each year, and this year, according to IRS own estimates, there's the entire pile of forms that it takes to file your taxes comes out to about 7.1 billion hours each year, with associated costs of roughly $287 billion. That cost comes from both IRS estimates for the limited subset of forms that they actually assign some sort of cost estimate to. Then we sort of fill in the rest using a certain wage rate to attach to the remaining hours unaccounted for. And so that sort of represented a slight dip from last year's totals. And if you look into the report, a lot of it's kind of changes in how IRS modeled some of their estimates. So it's kind of interesting in that instance. There wasn't a ton in terms of actual policy changes, though, that went one way or the other. We do, of course, have this year coming up the potential re-upping of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. And so depending on how that shakes out, we might see next year's report have some more significant policy shifts in terms of which direction some of these estimates go. So stay tuned for that, I suppose.
Interesting, very interesting. All right, one final hard-hitting question for you. Do the Giants have a chance to win the NL West this year?
I mean, if they keep up right now, it's, had modest expectations coming into this year, but so far so good. They're in a pretty tough division. Yeah. The Dodgers are actually kind of lagging from what everyone expected, I think, but the Padres look pretty strong, so the Diamondbacks are there. So it's going to be tough, but I mean, so far so good. Solid pitching, sound defense, timely hitting. It's formula's going to win you a lot of baseball games. They rode into a few championships a little over a decade ago, and now they have the cornerstone of that heading the organization. So I think it's pretty optimistic going forward.
It's the Dodgers are lagging behind at 14 and 6 right now.
Yeah, just really struggling.
But that division is almost as evil in heart as my division is, but with the Red Sox. But anyways, Dan, thanks for joining us.
Yeah.
Breaking down all these issues.
Anytime.
Hopefully we start getting a little bit more on this deregulatory front and we can have some more conversation.
One of the things that we can expect probably in the next couple months here is the administration's unified agenda of regulatory and deregulatory actions. Once that comes out, perhaps we'll have more details on the whole 10-to-1 situation and just the overall priorities and directions. So stay tuned for that for sure.
Interesting. Well, Dan, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you.
I hope you enjoyed this conversation. Tune back in for our next episode where our experts will provide clear, data-driven insights into today's